Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about the 2025 Virginia governor's race and a new poll that came out from Coefficient, which is a Republican-aligned pollster, which shows a very interesting result in this governor's race. So the article that talks about here is a new poll from August 23rd to 2026 of 1,025 likely voters in the Commonwealth of Virginia found a very interesting race happening with Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat, against Republican Winsome Sears. So the article says the poll showed a 5-point lead for Spanberger and also a tie between Democrat Khalzala Hashmi and John Reed, the Republican, for lieutenant governor, and a 1-point lead for Jay Jones over Republican Jason Miyares in the attorney general race. Now, for comparison, and I'll be doing this more in the video as well, a recent poll from Roanoke College showed Spanberger with a 7-point lead, Hashmi with a 3-point lead, and Jones also with a 3-point lead. Back to the Coefficient poll, both Spanberger and Earl Sears enjoy solid standing with voters, each viewed more favorably than unfavorably. Spanberger is rated 42 to 39 favorable, and Earl Sears is 40 to 36 favorable. The poll also goes over some key issues as well. But I thought this was very interesting because this poll, which has about a 5-point lead for Spanberger over Sears, has a few things going on here. For one, obviously, each poll you have to take with a little bit of a grain of salt, especially a poll that is a Republican-aligned pollster. So at 48 to 43, you would suggest, okay, it's a Republican poll. This usually means the Democrats doing better than the poll would suggest. But in this, Abigail Spanberger still has 48% and 7% of the votes still left undecided. When you look at Roanoke College, which just last week did a poll which showed Spanberger leading by about 7 points, that's a little bit more Democratic, I would say a bigger Democratic result for Spanberger, but also is not really too far off from the sentiment. In that one, there's still 14% of undecided votes, though, as Winsome Sears is only getting about 39%. At 43% so far, this is one of the more higher numbers we've seen Winsome Sears getting. Now, this is interesting because we're starting to see this race start to pick up a little bit as it's getting closer to November. We get into Labor Day. This is when the state attention and national attention as well starts to focus on Virginia. This is when people start to know who these candidates are. So you're going to see Winsome Sears' floor support rise up from the mid to high 30s into the low to mid 40s, like we're accustomed to seeing in governor's races in the state of Virginia. But Abigail Spanberger, for her part, in this poll, still getting 48% in this Republican poll, shows what the trend has been for a while now, which is that Abigail Spanberger is in a very strong position to win this race. With 7% undecided, she would only need to get about 2% more to break 50%, where Spanberger would need to get 7% more. So if Spanberger won 2% of the undecideds, that would get her to 50. Give the other 5% to Sears, Spanberger would still win by roughly about 2% based on this current poll. Now, obviously in Virginia, this isn't like some other states where you have to have a runoff to break 50%. Whoever gets the most votes in the Commonwealth of Virginia wins. But Abigail Spanberger is starting out with a much higher floor of support, and it's not just this poll. As I mentioned, the Roanoke College poll, Spanberger led by 7, 46 to 39. A lot of undecided vote left in that one, but Spanberger certainly has the advantage. WIC Insights from back in July had about a 10-point lead for Spanberger versus Sears, Spanberger already breaking 50% of the vote. And when you look at these polls, again, polls are not always the end-all be-all. You have to be careful when just going off of polls for predicting a race, but I like to look at the election results and how it's all shaping up. Right now in the polling averages, Spanberger's leading by about 7.3% from Real Clear Politics, 8.8% from Decision Desk HQ, and Race to the White House, 8.7%. We saw a race in 2021 in an election environment that was anti-democratic and more pro-Republican after Joe Biden was president and his approval ratings started going down, where the Republican Glenn Youngkin was able to win by 2 points. We also saw in 2017 a similar situation where President Trump, first-term president, his approval ratings started going down. Virginia, which voted against him in the presidential race, offered a big rebuke to their Republican candidate, Ed Gillespie, which in the final weeks and months of the campaign started to embrace a lot of pro-Trump messaging, which actually did tighten up the race in the polling, but come Election Day ended up being a very big win for the Democrats, where the Democrat Ralph Northam won by 8.9%, right around a 9-point victory. And when you look at how the polling's shaping up right now, it seems to be more on track with what 2017 Virginia ended up looking like than what 2021 did. And that's the question here. It's going to be, Can Winsome Sears do enough to replicate the map that Glenn Youngkin did in 2021, or is this race shaping up to be more like 2017, where Northam won by about 9 points? So far, the early polling and early momentum in this race has been that this is looking more like 2017. Now, in this one, Ralph Northam, the Democrat, got 53.9%. Ed Gillespie, the Republican, got 45%, with the Libertarian candidate getting 1.2%. Now, comparing that to the early polling in this race thus far, just looking at this coefficient poll, this is one of the better polls that Winsome Sears has gotten in the last few months or so. In this one, third-party candidates are getting about 3%, 7% still undecided. Sears is only at 43% of the vote. Spanberger's at 48% of the vote. So just comparing the numbers here, yes, obviously we're still a few months out and things are going to change in the undecided numbers. Sears is still roughly running about 2 points behind what Ed Gillespie got at that 45% number. So if there's a very big night for the Democrats where everything in this poll ends up breaking for the Democrats come election night, well, if you add that 7% to the 48, that would get to about 55%, 55-43. It's about a 12-point win at that point. I don't think that's going to happen. But you can see that at very least it's plausible considering this is a Republican poll, and this is likely either overestimating the Republican support or underestimating the Democratic support. Abigail Spanberger is already probably leading by that margin that 2017 ended up being. Now, I do think this race is starting to narrow up because I don't think come election day we're not going to see Winsome Sears get like 39% or 40% like these polls are showing at this current point in time. The recent election history in Virginia just doesn't suggest that. When you look at recent elections here, and I'll show you what the trend has been. In 2021, Glenn Youngkin obviously won. He got 50.57%. That was in an anti-Democratic year. In 2017, the last anti-Republican year we have to go off of, the Republican technically got about 45%, 44.97. 2013, before that, Virginia's changed a lot since then, but the Republican got 45.23%. And if you really want to go back even further, you can go back to 2009, the Republican, and a long time ago, got 58%. Again, anti-Democratic year. So the track record suggests that Virginia is probably going to have the Republican getting, if they lose, around 45, 44% or so. If they're winning, they're getting around 50%. But what is this election environment shaping up to be, and what are their polls leading up to it suggesting it will be that this will be more of a Democratic year? Where real car politics in the average now, Sears is getting up to 41%, Spanberger at 48.3%. This race with 10.7% either other or undecided for that margin. It's looking like right now, to me, this is going to be a race much similar to what 2017 ended up looking like. And the polling in this one, just to show you how it ended up going, we'll go to around where I'm recording this around August, towards the end of August here, and see what the polls were looking like at this current point in time, just to kind of touch base here. The Roanoke College poll showed 43-36 for Northam versus Gillespie in this race at this current point in time with 17% undecided. So there was a lot more undecided vote at this current point in time. Now the next poll in September showed a competitive race, about a 5-point race. Coefficient, I don't believe I see any of these polls from them in this one. But you see these numbers at this point in time, and you see Northam leading here with around similar numbers to what actually Abigail Spanberger was getting, around the mid to high 40s. Now, Northam didn't have as much support, it seems, as Spanberger does, but you see as you get into September, the numbers go up, where Northam is getting into the high 40s and even into the low 50s in some polls. Ed Gillespie is hovering around 41, 42, 43, 44% in these polls. Only in the Monmouth poll does he get to 48%. Most of them, otherwise, Gillespie was hovering around that 45% number or lower. And that's when you look comparing them to 2025, Winsome Sears is kind of in a similar situation. Aside from the few outliers, like this poll from Pantheon Insight Harris X, which has her at 48-52 in the head-to-head, but in the multiple candidates, one only at 45%. Winsome Sears is hovering around the same numbers that Ed Gillespie got, around that 43-44% at the absolute highest. So in forecasting this race right now for November, I think we're seeing something similar to what we saw in 2017, where Virginia ends up being a likely Democratic win, around 8 to 10% range or so at this current point in time. Now, obviously, as things happen over the next 2 months or so, things can certainly shift and change in this race. It could become more Democratic, and Spanberger could win by an even larger margin, breaking 10 points. it could significantly shift as well towards Winsome Sears' direction. And I do believe Glenn Youngkin's approval rating in Virginia is actually pretty high, especially for a Republican in more of a likely Democratic state. So it's possible voters maybe will give Winsome Sears more benefit of the doubt than the polls are currently showing. But at its current point in time, I have a very hard time seeing this race falling under a 5-point Democratic win, anything less than that. I also have kind of a hard time seeing it be more than like a 12-point Democratic win. I think, despite that, Virginia is still more of a competitive state than a safe Democratic state. So I think it's going to be around that 8 to 10-point range at this current point in time. But I think, make no mistake, this poll confirms the fact it is a Republican poll, that Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat, is on track to become the next governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Winsome Sears, even though this poll is one of the better numbers for her, it still shows she has a lot of ground to make up in this very pivotal governor's race. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you did, leave any comments or questions or anything you want to say down in the comment section below. I always check those out, so make sure to do that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, make sure to like and subscribe if you did, so you get posted when I make new videos like this one going forward. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in a future video.